till now we have seen the psychological as well as the procedural aspects of this knowledge creation process set out by the Nyaya Darshana. But when you are entering into an argument, which is the procedural aspect of this knowledge creation process, you cannot just advance whatever kind of argument that you want to advance. You remember I said that there are three types of arguments. One is the Vada, the Jalpa and the Vitanda, and the most recommended kind of argument is the Vada, in which there is a search for truth. When we are participating in that kind of an argument, we have to follow, or the Nyaya recommends that we follow a certain kind of logic. So, in this part we will try and see what are the logical steps involved in establishing our proposition. So, according to the Nyaya, every argument that we propose must have some 5 steps. So, what these 5 steps are, what are the details of that, let us try and get to know them a little bit. These 5 steps are called the avayava, or the parts of the standard argument or the standard model of argument that we are supposed to present in a vada. So, this is a combination of both deductive as well as an inductive kind of an argument. Now, this word may be somewhat non-familiar to some of the people. A deductive argument is something in which the conclusion necessarily follows from the premises. So, for example, if I say all men are pink, Raghavan is a man, therefore Raghavan is pink. So, from the two statements that all men are pink and Raghavan is a man, it necessarily follows that Raghavan is pink. So, if you accept the first two sentences, you must accept the third sentence also. So, it necessarily follows from the first two. So, these kinds of arguments are called deductive arguments. On the other hand, supposing I say one crow is black, the second crow I observed is black, the third crow I observed is black, the fourth crow I observed is black, therefore, all crows are black. So, in this case the conclusion does not necessarily follow from the premises. So, in these kinds of arguments are called inductive argument. So, the Nyaya argument model is a combination of both of these. It is not 100% deductive nor is it 100% inductive. So, this is a combination of the two, and each such argument is supposed to have, when you are demonstrating the argument to somebody else, it is supposed to have 5 steps. What are the 5 steps? The first one is the pratigna, or the setting forth of the hypothesis. So, for each of the step we will try to take one example and try to see how it works. So, the pratigna is the setting forth of the hypothesis. In my case, let us say I want to establish the proposition that sound is not eternal. The entity called sound is non-eternal. So, this is the pratigna or the hypothesis that I want to prove. So, in the first step one is supposed to set forth the hypothesis. After this comes the key reason or the hetu. On what basis do I want to prove my hypothesis? That is called the hetu. So, in this case my hetu is going to be that it is produced. Sound is non-eternal because it is produced. My main reason for saying that sound is non-eternal is that it is produced. Now, after this I am supposed to set forward the general rule and also provide examples. So, the general rule in this case would be whatever is produced is non-eternal, and I have to give one example, that is like a pot. So, this is a very important distinction between the Nyaya mode of argumentation and the Greek logic. For example, a statement of the form all men are pink, which I had just given, is acceptable statement in the Greek logic, whereas when you give such general rules in the Nyaya model, we must always furnish an example. So, you will notice that all men are pink, we will not be able to furnish any example, therefore, such statements are not accepted as general rules in this argumentational method, or in this logic it is not accepted as a general rule. So, whenever we set forth a general rule, we must give at least one example which we know conforms to that particular general rule. So, in this case the general rule is that whatever is produced is non-eternal. Please observe the form of this general rule. Wherever there is the hetu, the sadhya is there. So, in this case the sadhya is non-eternality, that is what I want to prove. Where do I want to prove this? In something called as a sound. So, sound is something technically called as paksha. I want to prove that it is non-eternal. So, non-eternality is the sadhya, and the basis on which I want to prove that is called the hetu. So, the general rule will always be of the form, the positive way of telling the general rule is wherever there is the hetu, the sadhya will be there. So, wherever there is the property of being produced, there all the property of non-eternality will be there. Have we observed this rule in any place? Yes, we have observed this rule in the case of a pot. the pot is a place which was produced, it is non-eternal. If I break the pot will not exist. Before the manufacturing of the pot, it did not exist. So, because of being produced only, it is there, and once it is destroyed, it will not be there. So, I have seen previously the application of the general rule. So, this is the third step in which we give the general rule as well as provide the one well known example for this. And then we have to establish that the example that we have given is like the current case that we are discussing. So, in this case it will be of the form sound is like that pot. So, we have to establish, just by giving previous instances it is not sufficient. We have to prove that the previous instance is like this particular instance. So, when they are arguing in the courts, they always present previous cases. They will try to say that, see, in the previous case this judgment was given, therefore, in this case also this judgment should be given, because the two cases are similar. So, one way of refuting that would be to say that no, the cases are not similar, therefore, we cannot give the same judgment in this particular case. So, a similar kind of a step must be here also. We have to prove that the current case is very much like the example that we have given, and after we do so comes the conclusion. Hence, we say that sound is not non-eternal. So, notice that the pratigna and the conclusion, the nigamana, seem to be very similar. So, the pratigna also is sound is non-eternal, and the conclusion also is sound is non-eternal. So, you may think that this is redundant, what is the point of repeating the same statement, but the difference between the two is that when the sound is non-eternal, this statement is said as part of the pratigna, it is still unproved, it requires proof. Whereas, once it is said as a conclusion, it is now understood that all the ambiguity is removed and the proper reason has been furnished. So, these are the 5 steps that are required to be there in every vada. So, in a vada, when we are presenting a particular anumana, in every anumana all these 5 steps are supposed to be there. So, remember, anumana was one of the 4 methods or means of acquiring knowledge, and if we are trying to demonstrate our anumana to somebody, we are trying to demonstrate our inference to somebody, all of these 5 steps should be there. If we are doing the inference for our own sake, it need not be the case, we may skip a few steps here and there, but when we are doing it in a vada, in the context of a debate between you and, let us say, your friend, you are supposed to step by step give all the details, so that it is very convincing to the respondent or the opponent. So, these are the 5 steps or avayavas which must go into making of a good argument. The knowledge that you arrive at using this 5 steps, it should not be fallacious, means it should not involve any logical fallacies. These logical fallacies in Sanskrit are called hetva bhasas. We will see what are the kinds of hetva bhasas that can occur. In the next part we will try and see that. And more importantly, the knowledge must not contradict established tenets. So, your new knowledge that you have created should not blatantly contradict the bank of knowledge that is already there. If that happens, it means that either this is wrong or the entire bank of knowledge is useless. So, remember, knowledge creation does not happen in a vacuum. If you have used that bank of knowledge to come up with some knowledge which does not agree with that, it means that something wrong has happened in the process of knowledge creation. So, the knowledge thus created using all the systematic step of argumentation, neither should it be fallacious, nor should it have any, nor should it conflict with the established tenets. So, what are these kinds of fallacies? What different kinds of tenets are established? We will see in the next part.